Daniel, when you went down there that morning, did you have any idea how dangerous that tunnel really was?
It was supposed to be routine, just another inspection. I never imagined the tunnel could turn into a trap.
That's when I knew nobody knew I was down there. The machine wasn't stopping. And I couldn't move. Help me! I'm down here!
When the belt finally stopped, I knew I had one chance. If the next shift hadn't heard me, I wouldn't be here talking to you.
What would you do if you fell into a machine built to crush stone and suddenly realized it wasn't going to stop? He shouldn't have still been alive. He shouldn't have still been breathing. But for 9 hours, a miner lay trapped inside a running conveyor belt crusher, unable to scream, unable to move, waiting for the moment the machine finally decided to kill him. He felt his ribs bend. He felt the steel vibrate under his skin. He listened to the engine humming inches from his skull, knowing every passing second could be the one that ended everything. This is the true story of the miner who survived 9 hours inside a running crusher in the darkest, tightest, most horrifying place a human can be trapped. The mine came alive before the sun. The ground shook. Dust hovered in the air. Long lines of conveyor belts growled through the early dawn as thousands of tons of rock began their journey toward the crusher. This was a place where machines didn't rest, where nothing fully shut down, where timing mattered more than breathing. Daniel Cross, a 38-year-old maintenance engineer, walked along the metal catwalk with his toolkit hanging at his side. This was the shift no one wanted. Too early, too loud, too dangerous. But Daniel knew these machines better than his own home. He knew every vibration, every change in pitch, every sound they made when something was wrong. And today, something was wrong. A belt tension sensor deep inside the crusher tunnel had been flashing irregular readings since dawn. If the belt went off alignment, the entire system could jam, shutting down production. Daniel was ordered inside the tunnel to check it. The tunnel was a narrow steel throat that fed rock into the main machine. 2 feet from the moving belt, 10 feet from the crusher jaws. A place where a single mistake meant you disappeared into the noise forever. Daniel clipped on his harness, adjusted his flashlight, and crawled inside. The moment he entered, the world changed. Outside, the conveyor system was loud. Inside, it was alive. The steel vibrated like a living creature. The belts thundered overhead. The air smelled of rust and hot oil. Every sound traveled directly through the walls and into Daniel's bones. He crawled deeper, keeping low, keeping his distance from the rolling belt. Chunks of rock roared past his shoulder, each one a reminder that this machine wasn't built for human presence. "Just tighten the sensor and get out," he whispered. But the tunnel felt different today, almost like it was breathing. Daniel reached the faulty sensor. The light blinked red with each rotation of the belt. He leaned forward carefully, tightening bolts with steady hands. A rumble passed through the floor. He froze. Was the crusher ramping up, or was it just settling? He brushed off the thought and kept working. Then it happened. A chunk of rock, rough, heavy, uncontrolled, fell from the upper belt and struck the platform Daniel was kneeling on. The platform jolted. Daniel's knee slipped. His hand reached for the wall. His boot found nothing. And gravity took him. He dropped into the path of the moving conveyor. His body slammed sideways between two belts. His ribs crushed against the vibrating wall. His left arm was pinned instantly beneath the rolling belt. His cheek pressed against the rough rubber surface. The conveyor didn't slow. It didn't hesitate. It simply absorbed him. He tried to inhale, but the pressure around his chest allowed almost no movement. His shallow breaths bounced back at him. His radio had shattered on impact. He tried to scream, but the machine devoured his voice completely. Daniel pushed with his free arm, desperate to move even an inch, to shift, to twist, but he couldn't. He was wedged in place, kept alive only by the exact geometry of the trap. If he slid even slightly forward, he would be fed directly into the crusher. His flashlight rolled away, leaving him half blind in the vibrating dark. The hum of the machinery filled the tunnel. The belts pressed harder. The steel trembled around him. And Daniel understood something horrifying. The conveyor wouldn't stop running for 9 more hours. 9 hours of compression. 9 hours of panic. 9 hours of fighting to stay conscious, while the machine slowly dragged him toward the crusher. He whispered, voice shaking, breath thin. "Not here," he whispered. But the machine didn't care. It never did. And the belts continued their slow, steady pull. Physical pain description. Daniel couldn't feel his left arm anymore. The pressure of the moving belt had numbed it completely, but the rest of his body felt every vibration, every tremor, every grinding shudder of the machine around him. He tried to lift his chest just enough to breathe more deeply, but the steel wall pressed so tightly against his ribs that even a full breath was impossible. Air came in thin, quick bursts. Each one felt smaller than the last. He tried to move his shoulder. Nothing. He tried to turn his head. Only a centimeter before the rough belt burned his cheek. He was wedged in the exact angle that kept him alive and slowly pushed him toward death. The first hour was the hardest, because his mind hadn't yet adjusted to the idea that no one knew where he was. He tried to shout again, forcing his voice through the crushing pressure on his chest. "Help!" The belt devoured the sound instantly. The tunnel swallowed his voice whole, replacing it with the steady hum of machinery. It was as if the machine enjoyed drowning him out. Daniel listened desperately for footsteps above the tunnel. Nothing. Just the endless rumble of ore moving through the system. He remembered the radio clipped to his belt. Maybe it survived the fall. Maybe he could still... He shifted his hips, searching for it. The slightest move sent a stabbing bolt of pain through his ribs. He grit his teeth and pushed again. A sharp hiss escaped him. His ankle bumped metal, but not a radio, just shattered plastic. The radio had broken apart completely when he fell. There was nothing left to reach for. A wave of panic swept over him, hot, sharp, like electricity under his skin. He tried to breathe through it, but the machine crushed his breaths into short gasps that only made the panic worse. His heart slammed against his chest so hard he thought the machine might hear it. The conveyor belt shifted slightly beneath him, tightening its rhythm. Daniel froze. Every time the machine adjusted tension, the entire tunnel changed shape. A subtle shifting of pressure, like a giant fist squeezing a fraction of an inch tighter. The shift pushed his torso forward, a millimeter, maybe less. But he felt it. He knew what that meant. He was moving toward the crusher. The realization hit him with a force stronger than the belt itself. "No! No! No, please!" His voice cracked. His breathing grew ragged. The machine didn't care. The belt continued its steady pull. He forced his head upward, scraping his cheek, his neck straining under the pressure. He needed to see if there was any space, a gap, a ledge, anything he could use to push himself back. There was nothing. Just the dark, vibrating steel walls and the moving floor dragging him inch by inch. Time blurred. Minutes felt like hours. Every vibration felt like the final warning before the belts pulled him into the jaws of the crusher. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the sound, but the sound was inside him. A never-ending mechanical heartbeat. Boom, 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 grinding, vibrating, crushing, repeating until his thoughts matched the rhythm. He realized something terrifying. He could feel the machine's pulse more clearly than his own. His mind drifted. Images flashed. His daughter's drawing on the fridge. His wife's tired smile the night before. The coffee he didn't finish that morning. The argument he'd planned to apologize for after work. He squeezed his eyes shut. "Stay awake," he whispered to himself. "Stay awake," because he knew the truth. If he fainted, even for a second, the belt might shift again and swallow him whole. His cheek grew warm. He realized he was crying. Tears were the only thing he could move freely. Another belt adjustment rippled through the tunnel. This time, he slid more noticeably. A full inch. He felt his boots brush a different part of the tunnel floor, a section angled downward. He froze. His heart hammered in terror. He had just crossed into the decline that led directly to the crusher. A thin, metallic scream echoed from deep ahead, the grinding teeth chewing through rock on the opposite end of the tunnel. A low rumble vibrated through the steel, a warning, a promise. Daniel felt the vibration travel through his ribcage, through his spine, into his skull. His breathing hitched. He whispered again, "Not like this, please." But the machine answered him in the only language it knew, the relentless pull of the conveyor belt, moving him toward the point of no return. Daniel fought to stay conscious, but the darkness pressing in was stronger than the light. His eyes flickered. His head dropped. His lungs tightened. He felt himself slipping, and the machine kept humming, unbothered, unchanged, unstoppable. The first hour was over. 8 more to go. Daniel drifted somewhere between consciousness and blackout, trapped inside a vibrating steel coffin that refused to give him a full breath. His cheek burned against the belt. His ribs throbbed. His pinned arm had gone completely numb, replaced with a cold, distant ache that felt like it belonged to someone else. He didn't know how much time had passed, but the darkness pressing at the edges of his vision told him the machine was winning. He tried to stay awake by counting breaths, 1, 2, 3, but each breath was shallow, crushed by the unyielding pressure of the steel wall pressing into his chest. His lungs simply couldn't expand any further. The lack of oxygen made his head swim, and his thoughts grew thick and slow, like moving through mud. He whispered to himself again, voice trembling, "Stay awake, Daniel." But the machine's rhythm kept pulling him downward, a deep, mechanical lullaby unlike anything human. The belt pulsed, the rollers thudded, the entire tunnel vibrated like a heartbeat, and Daniel's fading mind began sinking with it. Boom, boom, boom. The pulse wasn't his anymore. It belonged to the machine. The steel around him groaned and tightened as another automatic adjustment ran through the system. Daniel slid forward again. Not much, just enough for him to feel the crusher's low rumble a little closer. That sound, that deep, grinding roar, was starting to feel personal, like it was waiting for him. He tried to push himself back with his free arm, but there was nowhere to go. The tunnel held him like a vice. The belt pinned his wrist. The wall pinned his ribs. His hips were locked between steel and motion. He could move his fingers. He could move his jaw. Nothing more. His world had shrunk to a space barely larger than his own body. He felt the panic returning again, hot, suffocating, rising through him like floodwater. His heart pounded a desperate rhythm, making each shallow breath more erratic. He clenched his jaw and tried to steady himself. "You're okay. "You're okay." But he wasn't okay, and the machine knew it. A faint flicker of light sparked from somewhere deeper in the tunnel. The flash of grinding metal, sparks from rocks hitting steel. In his delirium, his mind twisted the sparks into shapes that looked like eyes. He squeezed his own eyes shut. Get a grip, it's just sparks. But when he opened them again, the tunnel still felt alive, watching him. His thoughts slipped again. He was no longer in the conveyor. He was in his kitchen, holding his daughter on his lap, listening to her talk about a science project she was excited for. Her small hands had flour on them from helping cookies, and she had looked up at him with that bright, unfiltered spark only children have.
Daddy, don't forget to come to school on Friday.
He had promised. A surge of emotion shot through him, real enough to jolt him back into the tunnel. His chest tightened, his mind sharpened. He forced his eyes to focus. "I'm not dying in here," he whispered. He tried to shift again. His ribs scraped against the steel. Pain exploded across his chest. He felt something crack, a small, sickening pop beneath his skin. His breath hitched sharply. The pain was white-hot, blinding. He nearly blacked out. He clamped his jaw shut, fighting the scream rising in his throat. The scream would have echoed for no one. It would have fed the machine, but not him. Tears pooled at the corners of his eyes, not from fear this time, but from pain so intense it blurred his vision. He swallowed hard. 3 hours had not passed, not even 2. He wasn't sure he'd make it to 1. But then, a sound cut through the tunnel. A soft thump, distant footsteps, metal boots. Someone was walking across the catwalk above him. Daniel's entire body froze. He couldn't yell. He couldn't lift his head. He couldn't bang the wall. His breath was too weak. His arm was pinned, his body trapped in a way that turned him invisible to the world. The footsteps paused. For a moment, hope surged inside him so violently it almost hurt. He tried to inhale, tried to summon a scream from the deepest part of his lungs, but his ribs refused to expand. The breath caught in his throat. The footsteps resumed, louder, closer. "Here, I'm—" It came out as a broken whisper, instantly swallowed by the machine. The person above walked away. Their steps faded. And Daniel felt hope collapse inside him. He was inches from rescue, inches from being heard, inches from being saved, but the machine had kept him silent. He pressed his forehead against the vibrating belt, tears sliding down his cheek. "No, no, please!" But no one did. The tunnel answered with nothing but its endless mechanical hum, a hum that felt more and more like a countdown. The crusher roared faintly in the distance. Daniel's eyes drifted shut again, and darkness crept in, a little deeper this time. Hallucination sequence. Daniel didn't know when the hallucinations began. Maybe it was minutes after the footsteps faded. Maybe it was an hour. Time inside the conveyor tunnel had melted into something unrecognizable. A thick, suffocating fog, broken only by the vibration of the machine pressing relentlessly into his bones. He tried to stay awake. He tried to focus on anything real. The smell of oil, the heat of the belt, the metal dust in the air. But the darkness was creeping in faster now. His body was losing the fight. The lack of oxygen, the crushing pressure on his chest, the sheer physical torment of being trapped in a space too small to breathe properly, it all conspired to pull him under. And then he heard it. A voice, soft at first, whispering through the vibrating steel. His heart froze. It sounded like his daughter. He opened his eyes, breath shaking. A small figure stood at the far end of the tunnel. Impossible, glowing faintly in the dim flickers of the machine.
Daddy!
His throat tightened. He tried to blink the vision away, but she stayed. "Sweetheart, you're not." The figure tilted her head, the way she always did when she was confused. He closed his eyes, tears leaking sideways along the moving belt. "I'm trying," he whispered. When he opened them again, she was gone. Only the metal walls remained, vibrating, pulsing, alive. He shuddered. The tunnel swallowed him again. His mind spiraled. He thought he heard a phone ringing. He thought he heard his coworkers shouting. He thought he heard the shutdown alarm, the one that meant the machine was stopping. But it never did. Every sound was just the machine, bending itself into shapes his starving brain could mistake for hope. A new wave of pain shot through his chest, sharp, deep, like something tearing inside. His breath hitched. He choked on the thin air he could pull in. The panic returned with brutal force. He tried to push himself back again. His hand slipped. The belt tugged his arm forward an inch closer to the crusher. Daniel's entire body seized with terror. The grinding roar at the end of the tunnel felt louder now, hungrier. "No, no, no, stop!" He fought with everything he had, muscles straining, veins bulging, his free arm shaking violently as he tried to brace against the wall. His fingers slipped again. The belt dragged him half an inch forward. He could feel the incline more clearly now, a downward slope meant to funnel rock directly to the grinder, and he was on it. His breath quickened, turning into rapid, choking gasps. He lifted his head as much as he could, barely 2 fingers worth of movement, but it was enough to see sparks flashing deeper inside the tunnel. Sparks created every time the crusher chewed through rock. Each burst of light was like a warning. "You're next. You're next. You're next." Daniel's eyes went wide. He screamed, not for help, not out of hope, but out of pure, instinctive terror. The scream never escaped the tunnel. It vanished into the machine's heartbeat. Boom, boom, boom. His ribs ached with each shallow inhale. He felt dizzy, nauseous. His lips tingled. His fingers went numb. He was suffocating. His body begged him to stop fighting, to let go, to slip into unconsciousness and escape the pain. But unconsciousness meant death. He knew it. The moment he passed out, the belts would adjust again. Just one shift, one small jolt, and he'd slide into the crusher. He pressed his forehead to the belt again. It was warm, alive, breathing in rhythm with the machine's pulse. He whispered, "Someone, please," but no one heard. No one even knew he was missing. Somewhere above him, the day shift continued working, unaware that beneath their boots, trapped in the steel throat of the machine, a man was fighting every second for breath. Daniel's vision blurred again. The edges went dark, the center dimmed. His head dropped, his body sagged. He slipped. Not far, but enough. The belt tugged him forward again. He wasn't on hour 4, or 3, or 2. He hadn't even survived 2 full hours yet, and he was already losing the battle.
Shift. Mystery. As he drifted toward unconsciousness, he felt it, a faint tremor from somewhere deep within the tunnel. A tremor that wasn't the belts. A tremor that wasn't the crusher. A tremor that felt like footsteps. Slow, heavy, echoing through the steel. Daniel forced his eyes open. Someone was coming, or something was coming. He tried to lift his head, tried to speak, tried to breathe. Everything went black, and the machine kept humming. Darkness, hopelessness. Daniel woke to darkness so complete, so absolute, that for a moment he thought the machine had finally taken him. No light, no shapes, no sparks reflecting off metal. Just the crushing pressure on his ribs, the numbness spreading through his arm, and the low, vibrating hum of the conveyor belt moving beneath him. Struggle. His breathing was shallow and ragged. Every inhale scraped against cracked ribs. Every exhale felt weaker than the last. He didn't know how long he'd been unconscious. Minutes? An hour? The tunnel offered no sense of time.
Only vibration and darkness. He tried to lift his head. It barely moved an inch, but even that inch was enough to send sharp pain shooting through his chest. The darkness wasn't natural. His flashlight had died. Now it was just him, the machine, and the grinder waiting at the end of the tunnel. He whispered into the black, "Please." But the only answer was the rumble of ore traveling past him, loud, uncaring, eternal. The belt tugged again, just a little, just enough to remind him that he was being pulled steadily downward, closer to the point where the conveyor narrowed and became inescapable. Daniel clenched his teeth, trying not to panic. He needed control. He needed oxygen. He needed to stay awake. But the darkness took away more than sight. It took away hope. Suddenly, a new vibration moved through the tunnel. Different, heavier, rhythmic. Footsteps. Real footsteps. He forced his eyes open wider, even though there was nothing to see. His heart pounded painfully fast. Someone was walking above him, right above the tunnel. Metal boots, slow, heavy, deliberate. A maintenance worker on patrol. Daniel pushed through the pain, forcing air into his lungs. This was his chance, his only chance. He tried to shout. Nothing came out. He tried again, harder, pushing against the crushing pressure on his ribs. A rasp, a broken whisper. Daniel, desperate strain. He tried again, drawing from whatever was left inside him. "Here, I'm here." But the machine devoured his voice before it even left his throat. The hum vibrated through the walls, shaking the words apart. The footsteps paused. Daniel froze. Had they heard something? He waited, every muscle trembling, every nerve listening. The boots shifted, turned. For the first time in hours, hope exploded inside him so violently he thought his heart would give out. Daniel whispered desperately, "Please look." The person above crouched. Daniel felt the vibration change, the weight shifting onto the metal plating above his head. Just one more step, just one glance, just one moment. The boots repositioned, and then walked away. The vibration faded. Daniel's hope collapsed with it. He felt something inside him break, not physically this time, but deeper, heavier, crueler. He was right there, inches below a worker, inches from being found, inches from survival. But the machine had silenced him again. A wave of despair crashed over him so powerful he couldn't fight it. His breathing quickened into painful, uneven gasps. His eyes blurred with tears that soaked into the belt beneath his cheek. Daniel whispered to no one, but he sounded less like a plea and more like a goodbye. His mind flickered. Voices that weren't real whispered through the tunnel. He heard his father's voice. He heard a radio that wasn't working. He heard a shutdown alarm that didn't exist. The machine twisted every faint sound, turning it into hallucination. His chest tightened again. Pain exploded beneath his ribs. A stabbing heat shot down his left side. He couldn't expand his lungs. He felt like he was drowning on dry steel. His eyes rolled back for a moment. The darkness thickened. His consciousness flickered. And then the belt jerked. Not much, just enough to shift his body forward a few centimeters. Those centimeters felt catastrophic. His boots touched the steeper part of the decline, the section where gravity began doing the machine's work. He was closer now, much closer. The roar of the crusher was louder, clearer, hungrier. He felt the tunnel vibrate with every grind. Another tremor passed through the belt, and Daniel understood something brutal. He wasn't going to survive 9 hours. He might not survive the next 30 minutes. His breathing grew faster. His pulse slammed against his skin. His vision dimmed around the edges. He whispered one final plea into the dark. "Please." As if answering him, the crusher roared again. The sound was thunder inside the tunnel. Daniel's eyes fluttered. His mind slipped. Darkness swallowed him a second time. and the conveyor continued dragging him toward the jaws of the machine. Daniel drifted in and out of a darkness that felt thicker than sleep, heavier than unconsciousness, something between fading and disappearing. His body was numb in places and burning in others. Every inch of him stretched between pain and silence. The machine hummed steadily beneath him, vibrating through his ribs like a cruel lullaby. Every time he slipped toward unconsciousness, the belts pulled him just enough to jolt him back into awareness. He couldn't tell if the machine was keeping him alive or dragging him toward death. Maybe both. A wave of dizziness washed over him. He tried to swallow. Nothing. His throat felt dry, scorched, scraped raw from breathing metal-filled air. Something warm trickled from his nose. Blood. He tasted iron on his lips. His body was shutting down. The tunnel grew colder, though the machine itself stayed hot. The cold wasn't real. It was shock. His skin prickled as if freezing from the inside out. He whispered weakly into the darkness, "I can't." The machine didn't care. It kept humming, kept vibrating, kept pulling. A faint metallic pop echoed through the tunnel, then another, followed by a deep grinding shift through the belts. A system overload. Tons of ore had backed up somewhere higher in the line. The sudden weight rippled through the entire conveyor system, forcing an automated tension correction. The belts jerked violently. Daniel's body slid forward. Not an inch this time. Not 2 inches. A foot. He felt it as surely as if he had fallen off a cliff. His chest slammed into the steel wall. His pinned arm twisted in a way no human arm was meant to bend. Pain shot up his spine like lightning. He screamed, and this time the sound actually escaped him. A raw, broken, terrified howl swallowed instantly by the roar of the machine. The crusher's voice grew louder.
He could feel the vibrations from its teeth through the soles of his boots. He was dangerously close now. Too close. He tried to dig the nails of his free hand into the steel wall, trying to stop his body from sliding further, but the wall was smooth, coated with vibrating dust and grime. His fingers scraped uselessly. Another tremor, another belt correction, another violent tug. He slid again. His entire body shook with adrenaline and terror. His muscles spasmed uncontrollably. His breath came in rapid, wet gasps. He whispered through trembling lips, "I'm not ready. I'm not." His vision blurred again, not from tears this time, but from oxygen loss. Dark shapes flickered at the edge of his sight. He saw a silhouette walking toward him in the tunnel. A person, tall, calm, carrying a flashlight. Daniel whispered, but the light wasn't real. It flickered and dissolved, melting into sparks from the grinding machinery. His mind was fracturing. He forced himself to look up, to find anything real, anything solid to hold on to. But the tunnel was spinning, and the grinding roar of the crusher felt like it was inside his skull. Another tremor shook the belt, not as strong as before, but enough for Daniel to feel the motion. He slid half an inch, just a half inch, but he felt gravity change around him. The decline steepened. He was on the final slope, the slope that fed victims, rock or human, into the crusher. His breath caught. His chest tightened so much he thought his rib cage might collapse. He tried one last desperate push backward. His hand slipped. His ribs screamed. His vision turned white. He nearly blacked out. But then, a sound cut through the tunnel. A voice. A real voice. "Let's check the belt tension again." Daniel's eyes flew open. 2 workers walking the catwalk above him. He could feel their footsteps vibrating through the steel ceiling. They were close, closer than anyone had been. He summoned every ounce of strength left inside him, every breath, every muscle, every speck of will, and he tried to scream. Nothing came out. He tried again, harder. A choked whisper. Barely a breath. Again, a faint croak. His ribs wouldn't expand. His lungs wouldn't fill. His voice was trapped inside him. The workers walked slower, inspecting equipment.
One of them tapped a wrench against the steel to check for rattling. Daniel felt the vibration directly through his chest, a hollow metallic thud that echoed inside his ribs. He tried to respond, tapping his fingers weakly against the wall. Nothing. He had no strength left. The workers paused again. One said, "Feels like the belt tension is off." Daniel's heart pounded. "Yes, yes, yes, please, please hear me." The second worker replied, "Night shift will check the tunnel." Night shift? Hours away, far too long. Daniel felt the spark of hope turn into a cold panic. "No, don't go, don't!" But his voice was nothing but air. His lips moved, nothing more. One of the workers tightened a bolt above him. The other wrote something onto a clipboard. Their footsteps shifted. They were leaving. Daniel's eyes widened in terror. His chest tightened. His fingers curled helplessly. Tears streaked sideways across his cheek. "Please, please!" Silence swallowed the rest. The footsteps faded. Daniel was alone again. Alone with the machine. Alone with the pain. Alone with the growing certainty that he would not survive another hour. Darkness tugged at him once more. This time, it felt final. His eyes slipped closed. His breathing slowed. And the conveyor belt pulled him a little closer toward the jaws of the crusher. Daniel didn't know when the darkness changed. One moment, it was heavy and suffocating, the kind of darkness that pulled you down like water. The next moment, he felt something different in the tunnel. A tremor, a shudder, a sharp metallic groan echoing through the steel walls. It jolted him awake. His eyes flew open to nothing but blackness, but his instincts reacted before his mind caught up. Something was wrong with the machine. Not the slow rhythmic adjustments he had felt earlier, not the subtle vibration shifts. This was different. Sudden, violent, mechanical pain. The conveyor jerked so hard that Daniel's entire body snapped forward, slamming his shoulder into the steel wall. A flash of white pain exploded across his vision. He gasped, the first full breath he'd taken in hours, only because the sudden jolt momentarily loosened the crushing pressure on his chest. Another violent shudder ripped through the tunnel. The belt screeched, metal screamed. A cascade of ore thundered somewhere above him. The entire conveyor system shook like it was tearing itself apart. Then, for the first time since Daniel had fallen inside, the belt slowed, just a little, just enough for him to feel it. The machine was jamming. A blockage somewhere up the line had built too much weight, too much resistance. The system couldn't push the ore forward, and now the motor struggled against thousands of pounds of pressure. Daniel felt it instantly. The vibration under his ribs softened. The belt's pull weakened. The tunnel's relentless rumble dropped into a lower, strained growl. For the first time in hours, the machine was losing control. He didn't know whether to feel hope or terror. Because as the belt slowed, the incline beneath him seemed steeper. Gravity pulled at him harder, like the tunnel wanted to make up for lost time. His boots slid forward. He stiffened in panic. He tried to dig his free hand into the steel wall again, but he had no strength left. His numb arm was trapped. His body was soaked in sweat, blood, and dust. Every muscle trembled uncontrollably. His torso slid another inch. He felt the tunnel narrow around him, the final section before the crusher. The grinding roar at the end of the tunnel grew louder, clearer, closer. He knew where he was now. One more meter, maybe less, and he'd be pulled into the place where rock was turned into dust. His breathing spiraled into panic. "I'm not dying in here! I'm not dying in here!" His whisper cracked into silence. Another metallic scream tore through the tunnel. Then something incredible happened. The belt stopped. Not completely,
Not safely. It convulsed, stuttered, jerked violently. The overload had forced an emergency stall. Daniel slammed backward against the wall, every bone in his body rattling. His teeth clacked together hard enough to draw blood from his tongue. But he wasn't sliding anymore. He wasn't being dragged toward the crusher. He lay there, trembling, gasping for whatever air he could steal. It wasn't over. The machine could restart at any moment. But this stall bought him minutes. Minutes he desperately needed. Above him, alarms began to blare. Real alarms, not hallucinated ones. A sharp, piercing beep echoed down the tunnel. The overload alarm from the control panel. Workers would hear that. Someone would come to investigate. Footsteps ran across the catwalk. Daniel's pulse surged. He forced his voice out, broken, hoarse, barely audible. "I'm here. I'm here."
Nothing came out loud enough to reach the surface. He pushed harder, feeling a rib shift painfully. "Here! Help!" His voice cracked. He could barely breathe. He could barely think. The belt twitched beneath him, a terrifying reminder the system was still alive. Any moment now, the motors could reset. The belts could surge back to full speed. The crusher could roar into motion, and he would have no chance. Daniel's throat tightened. Tears streaked sideways along his cheek again. "Please!" He felt the footsteps above pause. The vibration froze. Someone had stopped directly over him. A voice shouted, "Check the tunnel!" Daniel's heart exploded with hope. "Yes! Yes! Yes!" He tried again, pushing the last breath out of his lungs. "Here! I'm here! I'm—" The belt jerked. Just a small twitch, just a warning. It shoved him downward again, a fraction of an inch, but enough to make him gasp in terror. He had seconds, minutes if he was lucky. The hatch above clanged open. A flashlight beam cut into the darkness at the far end of the tunnel. Daniel sobbed with relief. They were coming inside. His body trembled uncontrollably as he whispered the words that had been burning inside him for hours. "Please." The flashlight moved through the tunnel. Closer, closer, closer. The worker crawled inside, unaware he was inches from a man who had been fighting death for nearly 8 hours. The light drifted along the walls and landed on Daniel's shoe. The worker froze. Daniel's breath stopped. The flashlight slowly tilted upward. Everything that followed happened fast, explosive, chaotic, a race against the machine restarting. Daniel didn't know what they were shouting. He didn't know who was touching him. He didn't know what tools they were grabbing. All he knew was someone had finally seen him, and he wasn't alone anymore. The worker's shout echoed through the tunnel like a lifeline thrown into darkness. "He's in the tunnel!" Daniel didn't fully understand the words. His mind was fogged, his breath thin, his vision fading in and out like a dying light bulb. But he understood the tone. Someone had found him. Someone finally saw him. Hands grabbed his shoulder, gentle at first, then firmer when they realized how tightly he was wedged between steel and motion. A flashlight beam hit his face, and Daniel squinted, the sudden brightness burning his exhausted eyes. "Stay with us, you hear me?" He tried to nod. Only his eyelids moved. Behind him, the belts twitched again, a sickening reminder that the machine wasn't dead, only stunned. Any second now, it could lurch back to life, and if it did, nothing would stop it from pulling him into the crusher. The workers knew this. "Kill power to Section 4, someone shouted. A distant voice yelled back, "Overload jam hasn't cleared!" Daniel felt dread ripple through him. They didn't have full control. The system might restart automatically. A worker leaned in close. "Daniel, we're going to get you out, but you need to stay awake, okay?" He tried to speak. The worker swallowed hard. They had minutes, maybe less. 2 more rescuers crawled into the tunnel with cutting tools, pry bars, and emergency wedges. The space was so tight they could barely maneuver. One worker grunted, "He's pinned under the belt." Another replied, "If we lift too much, we trigger a reset." Daniel listened, terrified, as they debated how not to kill him by accident. The faint hum of the belt returning to tension made every man freeze. "We don't have time," one rescuer said. "We lift on 3. Daniel braced himself, or tried to. His body had nothing left. Metal groaned, tools scraped, sparks flicked across the tunnel. Daniel felt pressure build on his pinned arm. He nearly screamed. The workers heaved upward. The belt rose an inch, just an inch, but in the cramped, crushing tunnel, it felt like the world had shifted. "Push him back!" Hands slid under Daniel's side, bracing his ribs, his shoulder, his waist. The pain was indescribable. He felt something tear inside him, a white-hot explosion through his chest and spine. His vision flashed with fragmented light. He screamed, but the sound dissolved into the mechanical roar. The rescuers didn't stop. "Keep pushing!" They shoved harder, pulling his torso backward, freeing his arm from the grinding belt. His skin burned where the rubber had scraped him raw. His ribs screamed. His breath hitched and collapsed in on itself. But he moved. He moved. Inch by inch, they pulled him out of the machine's grip. Then the belt twitched. "It's resetting!" Panic exploded in the tunnel. The rescuers grabbed Daniel under his arms and dragged him backward as fast as they could in the cramped space. His legs scraped along the metal floor. His boots caught on bolts. His shoulder slammed into the wall. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He could only feel himself being dragged away from the crushing maw. Behind them, the conveyor belts sputtered, struggled, shuddered. Then, with a deafening metallic roar, the system surged back to life. The belts snapped forward. The crusher growled awake. 1 second earlier, Daniel would have been pulled in, but he was out, just out. The rescuers dragged him through the hatch and onto the catwalk as the tunnel behind them roared with renewed life. Daniel collapsed on the metal floor, gasping desperately for air that finally had space to fill his lungs. One rescuer knelt beside him. You're okay," but his voice was shaking. Daniel stared up at the ceiling, disoriented, tears sliding sideways across his dirt-covered face. He whispered, "I didn't think anyone." A rescuer gripped his hand. "We should have checked sooner, but you held on." Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in 9 hours, he wasn't fighting the machine. He wasn't fighting the darkness. He wasn't fighting himself. He was just breathing, just alive. Sirens echoed through the mine. Voices shouted. Medical staff rushed toward him. The world around him blurred, but one thought cut through everything. He survived something that should have killed him 100 times over, and he'd never hear the sound of a conveyor belt the same way again.